There we go. Okay, welcome to those in attendance at this remote meeting of the local review body of Amenity City Council on today, the 16th of August 2023. Please note that the meeting will be recorded and published online for public to access after the meeting. You are also reminded to note that we may have members of public and press observing today's proceedings. Can I ask all those who are observing today's meeting to keep their microphones and cameras switched off throughout, please? Can members of the review body leave their cameras on but mute their microphone when not speaking? As the local review body contains quasi-judicial business, members are reminded that they should not leave the meeting during consideration of any of the reviews. The meeting has been convened in response to initially 3 requests for review, but one of these has been deferred, and we'll discuss that in a few moments. This will be in for decisions taken by the appointed officer under the council's scheme of delegation. Members of the local review body have before them copies of the review documents as listed in the notice calling to the meeting. I will now ask Ms McBain, the Assistant Clerk, to outline the procedures to be followed in the conduct of these reviews, and will also take a roll call of members present. Ms McBain.
Thank you, Convener. I'll just quickly do a roll call for the recording, so just please state that you're present. So Councillor McRae?
Present.
Councillor Clark?
Present.
Councillor Bowes?
Present.
Councillor Cook?
Present.
And Councillor Radley?
Present.
Thank you. I'll just read out the procedure note. So members have the procedure note, which was circulated within the meeting papers and is intended to set out the wider framework within which the review process operates. From this, it is clear that the first task for the review body is to come to a decision on whether the review documents contain sufficient information for the case to be determined without further procedure, and by this it is meant without further information or representations. To assist, I feel it would be helpful to mention the following. Firstly, that the regulations governing the local review process require that all matters which the applicant intends to raise in the review must be set out in or accompany the notice of review. Secondly, that the focus of the review should be on the basis of what was before the appointed officer when a decision was made, and only in exceptional circumstances will new or additional matters be permitted to be taken into account. Thirdly, to note that the modernisation of the planning system, which included revisal of the planning appeals process, of which this local review body is part, removed the previous right on the part of an applicant to insist on a hearing and replaced that with the LRB, providing them with the power to choose a procedure which more accurately reflects the facts and circumstances of the individual case. And lastly, that guidance issued by Scottish Government's Chief Planner in 2011 stated that reviews by LRBs should be conducted by means of full consideration of the application afresh. This review should take the form of a structured discussion led by the chairperson to consider the matter set out in the notice of review before you. And I would conclude by drawing your attention in particular to points 10 to 12 of the procedure note. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms McBain. Before we go into the agenda, like I mentioned earlier, agenda item 3.1 in relation to Craigbank 132 North Deeside Road, planning reference number 221543 has been deferred at this time. Okay, so turning to consideration of the first review in respect to the decision to refuse the application of formation of the first floor extension over existing garage to side, erection of single-storey extension to side, and rear of 8 Laurel Park, Aberdeen, AB 228XW, planning reference number 221545. We will now hear from the planning advisor in attendance, Ms Lucy Green, who will provide us with a brief description of the application proposal and a reminder of the reasons why the application was refused. I would point out that Ms Green attends today's meeting to provide us with the necessary professional planning guidance because she has not been involved in the earlier consideration of the application under review. Ms Green will not, however, be asked to express any view on the merits of the proposed development, and in effect her role will be a neutral one, involving the provision of factual information and guidance only. Ms Green.
Thank you, Convener. I'm just share my screen. Can you see that okay?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Thanks. So this is the review into the application that was refused under delegated powers. And it was submitted with all the necessary information within the time limit of 3 months following the decision of the appointed officer. The applicant has indicated that there are no new matters that have been submitted in the submissions. However, it's noted that the statement of support refers to a new matter, which I'll mention later in my presentation. That relates to the personal circumstances of the applicant. So I'll come back to that before breaking off for members to decide whether they wish to take that into account and how to proceed. In terms of the procedure by which the review will be conducted, the applicant has expressed the view that a site visit should take place in order to fully consider the existing pattern of development, and that the review should not proceed on the basis of the information submitted. So I'll first continue and provide some more background information. So this is the location plan. This site's a detached house situated just here. This is Granham Drive, just to the southeast. And it's a detached house within an area of similar houses within the Dainston area of Aberdeen. And just moving on to overhead photo from Google. It's the application property just there. And then I've taken a couple of shots from the 3D imaging. So that's looking from the west towards the front of the house within the Laurel Park cul-de-sac. So this is number 17 next door, 16. And then another image just looking from the southeast. So that's the end of Granham Drive that you can just see there. And these trees along the boundary, number 17, 18, the application property. And this is a site plan, just showing the property, and I'll move on to the layout plans. So on the left is the existing plan. So you can see that there's a garden room that's on the south side of the house, and an existing conservatory as well, which is on the east side. Spoof that. So the extensions would wrap around the rear and south side of the property. That's at the ground floor level, and you can see the existing original line of the house there in the red dashes. I'll just move on to the upper floor plan. So you can see there the extension added at the first floor level above the garage. In terms of elevations, that's the front elevation of the house with the existing house there in the garage, and then the extension added on top. You can see that it matches the same ridge height and eaves line, and the materials match the existing house. Just looking at the other elevations, this is the south elevation, the existing extension there. And then that would be replaced with this, which extends around the east side of the house as well. And then the east elevation, so that's the extension, first floor level. And again, north elevation, the existing house with the garage with the irregular pitched roof there, and then the extension that would be built under the application proposal. The next slide shows some images that were submitted in the review. So that's obviously the extension. Again, that's part of the extension. And I'll just move on to the sunlighting study that was submitted by the applicant. So I've got quite a few slides of this, which start in spring. So you can see they've just compared the existing and proposed at different times of day. And then also spring, 3 p.m. So probably the 3 p.m. one is the clearest difference. So you can see this is number 17 to the north, and the increase or the impact on the overshadowing there. So same thing for June. 9 a.m. So that's looking at the front of the property. 12, they've swung round to the back. And the next slide shows 3 p.m. and 6 p.m. So in June, you can see the difference, 3 p.m. and 6 p.m. And then moving on to autumn. Again, they've just shown the front at 9 a.m. 12, difference in the shadow to the rear. And then 3 p.m. It's the rear of the property there. 6 p.m. all in shade. And winter. There's not a great deal of difference in winter. So I won't stay on that one. In terms of the reasons for refusal, these are stated in full in the agenda, but they're summarised as follows. The impact on the residential amenity to 17 Laurel Park, which was the property just shown in those sunlighting diagrams, that it would be adversely affecting sunlight to areas of the rear garden for substantial periods through the year, and that it would be therefore contrary to policies on design, quality homes, residential areas and amenity in both the local plan and national planning framework 4. And the report references the 45-degree rule to conclude that there's overshadowing on the neighbour. For the applicant's case, there are a number of points made. They highlight that the concerns relate only to the upper floor extension. They consider the proposals are not overbearing and wouldn't impact on sunlight significantly when you take into account boundary enclosures and trees. They cite the lack of objection from a neighbour and the notes of support that are included. Just to point out that those weren't representations to the planning authority. They request a site visit. They state that there's no loss of daylight to number 17 due to the sun path and the existing development, including boundary fences, meaning that there's little difference. They point out that the garden at number 17 sort of rises towards the north, and that's where the neighbour's patio is. And also because of the 6-foot fence, there are some photographs of that, there would be little impact. They point out the minimal increase in height from the existing ridge to the new eaves. That's the existing ridge of the garage, on top of which the extension would be built. And then they highlight the removal of trees would increase light to the neighbour. Some further points. that there would be no impact on privacy or loss of open space. Oh, sorry, I lost the icon then. I thought I'd lost connection. That the neighbours use the front garden in the evenings, and and that the overshadowing would affect only 9.5 square metres, which isn't significant given the size of the curtilage. And they cite precedent for the style of extension with examples given of photographs of houses in the neighbouring area. In terms of planning history, the case officer's report includes the application, previous application in 2021 for the erection of a first floor extension, which was slightly larger than the one that's approved, that's the subject of this application. And that was refused because it would be of an unacceptable scale, design and massing, resulting in an expansive development being erected that would appear oppressive and visually intrusive when viewed from the neighbouring property to the north. And also taking into account the orientation of the proposed development in relation to the neighbouring site at number 17 Laurel Park. Proposal would have a significant and unacceptable degree of overshadowing. So that was the previous application at the site. And the differences, as I mentioned, are that the previous upper floor extension projected further along the northern boundary. So in terms of consultations, Dainston Community Council made no comment and the roads had no objection. There were no representations submitted to the Planning Authority. Now, just before I hand back, moving on to consideration of the new matters that have been raised. As I noted earlier, there was some new information that had been submitted in relation to the applicant and her personal circumstances. So I'll hand over to our legal advisor, Fiona Kloss, in a moment. But first of all, just to point out that personal circumstances are not normally a material consideration. However, in terms of the Equalities Act, some of those relate to the protected characteristics of the applicant, and those are material considerations. However, just to note that other personal circumstances noted in that submission are not material, and overall, the circumstances that relate to the Equalities Act would need to be balanced against other material considerations. So I'll just hand over to Fiona Kloss on this slide.
Thanks, Ms. Green. Yes, as Ms. Green has said, there are certain restrictions about new matters being raised in an LRB review. And I'm sure the LRB members have heard this before, but it's just to remind you of what the test is that's set out in the legislation. So in order for the LRB to be satisfied that a new matter should be taken into account, they need to be satisfied that the party has demonstrated that that matter could not have been raised before that time, and also that it not been raised before that time was a consequence of exceptional circumstances. However, the above does not affect the requirement for the LRB to have regard to the development plan or any other material consideration. As Ms. Green has also noted, the personal circumstances of an applicant are not considered to be material considerations. I'm happy to take any questions on this slide, otherwise I'll pass back to Ms. Green now.
Thank you. Do any members have any questions regarding this point? Oh, apologies, my network dropped there. Councillor Cook.
Thank you, convener. Yeah. So could officers just clarify, I may be being a bit slow here. Could you just clarify whether we should or should not take into account the protected characteristics under the 2010 Act in relation to this one?
Apologies, Chair, if I could come in on that point. Yes, Councillor Cook, Equalities Act considerations under the Equalities Act are material considerations and can be taken into account.
Thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, so I guess we go to the question, are members content to accept the additional recommendations, or are they happy to move on without accepting the additional information there? So go around the room. Councillor Cook.
Yeah, I'm happy to proceed with what we've got in front of us.
Is that with the additional information or without?
I'm minded to go with the additional information.
Okay. Councillor Clark.
I'm minded also to go with the information.
Okay. Councillor Bouse.
I'm also minded to go with the additional information.
Okay, and Councillor Radley.
Similarly minded to go with the additional information. Thank you.
Okay, going by majority there at the moment, we will accept the additional information within this report. So I think I hand back to you, Ms. Green.
Yes, at that point I was going to hand back anyway for you to decide how to proceed in regards to site visit, or whether you wish to proceed today with the decisions.
Okay, therefore we move on. We now need to consider whether we have sufficient information in front of us today to take a decision on the application. Members, reminder that if you do not feel you have enough information to take a decision, you could request that a further written information be provided, hearings be arranged, or a site visit to be undertaken. So we'll go around the room again. At the moment, I feel that we have sufficient information to proceed. Councillor Radley.
I agree with you, Convener.
Thank you. Councillor Bouse.
Yeah, I also agree with you, Convener.
Thank you. Councillor Clark.
I agree with you, Convener.
And Councillor Cook.
Yep, I also agree.
Thank you. As members feel they have sufficient information, we will now hear from Ms. Green on the relevant policies and considerations for this review. Thank you.
Thanks.
That's the slides visible now.
Okay, right. Sorry, just my notes as well. So in terms of policies that are relevant here, there's those in the National Planning Framework and also in the Local Development Plan 2023. So first, policies within NPF 4. The first three policies, 1, 2 and 3, are relevant to nearly all applications. They're overarching, and policy 6 in relation to trees, that would normally seek the retention of trees. I'll just move on to the next slide for policy 14 and 16. So in terms of householder development, proposals would be supported where they didn't have a detrimental impact on the character and environment of the home and the surrounding area in terms of their size, design and materials. And secondly, that they don't have a detrimental impact on neighbouring properties in terms of the physical impact overshadowing or overlooking. And then policy 14 seeks high quality design in a similar way to the local plan policy. Relevant policies from the local development plan, and I'll look at these in a bit more detail in the following slides. It's within a residential area in the local plan. policies on design and amenity are also relevant, as well as the householder guidance. So residential areas policy, this is residential development, so it will be approved in principle in accordance with this policy, depending on these criteria. So does it constitute overdevelopment? What would the impact be on the character and amenity of the surrounding area? There's no loss of open space, so that one's not really relevant. Complies with supplementary guidance, and that would be the householder guide in this case. So the relevant considerations are that occupiers are afforded adequate levels of amenity in relation to daylight and sunlight. And then, so this is in terms of policy D2 on amenity. In terms of residential development in particular, that you would ensure minimal shading of external and private and public spaces. And although those two criteria really sort of relate to new development, are sort of indicative of the issues that would be considered. And those are also covered by the householder guidance. So in terms of the general principles, I've just pulled out the ones that are particularly relevant in this case. Extensions should be architecturally compatible. The materials should be complementary. Extensions shouldn't overwhelm or dominate the original form. Those are the general ones. And then particularly of relevance here is the impact on neighbouring properties in terms of daylight and sunlight, and the 45-degree rule which is applied. So moving on to design policy, and this is similar in effect to the policy 14 within NPF 4. High quality design is sought with a view to improving the overall quality of the area. And the recognition that not all development, whilst it may not be of a scale that makes a significant placemaking impact, good design and detail adds to the attractiveness of the built environment. So overall evaluation would be in accordance with the development plan, unless material considerations indicate otherwise. And the basis for the decision in this case would be whether the proposals comply with policy H1 on residential areas, how would they affect character and amenity of the area? And in particular, in this case, would there be an acceptable impact of the size of the extension in relation to overshadowing in particular? So does the proposal comply with the development plan as a whole, or are there material considerations which would outweigh that? Thank you. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Green. Do any members have any questions? Councillor Cook.
Thanks, convener. Yeah, could you just go back to the slides you showed us earlier around the shading, the shadowing in relation to different times of the year?
Yeah.
Yep, those are the ones.
Should I start from the spring one? Or was there one in particular?
No, it was. To be honest, it was all of them. It was kind of yeah. I'd just like to look at all of them again, if that's possible.
Yes. So they start at the front for the 9 AM one. It tends to be the 3 PM that seems to show the most difference. So that would be the spring one. If I'm going too fast, just let me know.
No, it's fine. It's okay. Thank you.
And shall I just go to the winter one? There's not much to see on that one.
Thanks. That was helpful.
Okay.
Thank you. Councillor Radley.
Just with regards to them photos, sorry, Miss Green. Thank you, Convener. Does the photo, does them pictures that we just saw of the shading show the extent of the boundary of the neighbouring property, or do you understand what I mean? So, is it representative of the boundaries of each of the properties?
As far, I mean, it's showing the boundary fence there in the software. So, you know, I can assume that it hasn't got the trees in it, I suppose, but it has got the fence. So it may not be, you know, there'll be some degree of sort of
No, that's helpful just
inaccuracy,
to
but
understand the scale of what we're looking at. That's really helpful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do any other members have any questions? I'm not seeing any hands. Okay, in accordance to the procedural note circulated, the local review body will now discuss and decide the manner in which the review is to proceed. I would highlight that all representations related to the case have been considered and taken into account. Does any member wish to raise anything, put any points across, have any? Remember, I think you're all on mute at the moment, so feel free to unmute yourselves. John, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just thinking, looking at the pack, on pages 48 to 49 of the pack, it does look as though there are some properties in the immediate vicinity which have had similar extensions. So I'm wondering, if we turn down this when others in the neighbourhood are similar, are we being unreasonable?
Yep, it's a fair point, Councillor. Any other member? So I think in terms of that point, in terms of policy H1, there is a number of other properties of similar build and character within that street. So I do think that sort of applies in this circumstance. Going by the overshadowing in terms of what we've seen, I think the worst just seems to be during sort of the summer solstice or 3 p.m. Although we do have the rules of 45 degree, I'm not convinced there's significant overshadowing, if that makes sense, to outweigh the merits of the rest of the application and extension. I don't know if anyone has any thoughts on that. Councillor Cook.
I think it's significant. Thanks, community. I think it's significant that the neighbours haven't objected. So the overshadowing is the thing that has worried me. But since the neighbours are not objecting, that kind of tells me something.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that point as well. Okay. If we are all content at that, are we happy to proceed to determination? Seeing nodding heads. Okay, so we now move on to determination. So we need to state the grounds in respect of the application and state for the minute the grounds that the decision referring to plan policy were appropriate. So I am happy to overturn at this point in condition with policy H1 character, similarity to others in the street, as well as the lack of representation from the neighbours in regards to the overshadowing of their said property. I'll just go around the room. So we have Councillor Cook.
I agree with you, convener.
Okay, Councillor Radley.
Agreed.
Councillor Clark.
Agreed.
And Councillor Rouse.
Agreed.
Okay. As the local review body has agreed to overturn the decision of the appointed officer, we now need to consider whether any conditions should be attached to the approval of the application. So does anyone have any conditions that you want to highlight? Miss Green.
It might be worth mentioning in the report of handling, the case officer highlights that they would have looked at replacement trees for any that were lost. So you might want to consider whether it'd be worth putting a condition on requesting a plan showing which trees would be removed and replacements.
Are members happy to accept that condition? I'm seeing lots of nodding heads. Thank you, Miss Green. Okay, please note that decision notice from today's meeting will be issued to the applicant or agent in the forthcoming days, and that application has been overturned and approved. Thank you, members. Okay, so we move on from that one, and we now turn to consideration in respect of the decision to refuse the application for the erection of a 1.5-storey extension with a raised decking and balustrade to the rear of 10 Woodhill Place, Aberdeen, AB 155LF, planning reference 230143. We will now hear from Planning Advisor in Attendance, Miss Lucy Green, and just a reminder of why Miss Green is attending this meeting today. Miss Green.
Thank you. Can you see that? Okay.
Yeah, we can, thank you.
So this is a review into the refusal of an application for a 1.5-storey extension with raised deck at 10 Woodhill Place. And it was submitted with all the necessary information within the time limit of 3 months following the decision. There were no new matters raised within the submissions. And in terms of procedure, the applicant expressed the view that the review may proceed on the basis of the information submitted. So I'll continue to show you plans of the proposal. First of all, the location plan. So the application relates to a semi-detached house which has a driveway to the north side, next to number 12. Looking at 3D images from Google, you can see the front of the house there with the garden extending into the back, and looking from the other direction, you can see the existing single-storey extension and the way that the ground sort of falls away in the gardens, slopes down towards the east. So the garden level is approximately 1.5 to 2 meters below the ground floor level to the back of the house. And there's a boundary wall, well, it's a combination of wall and fence of approximately 1.6 meters in height along the boundary with the adjoining semi. And there's also a single-storey outbuilding at the end of the garden. The existing rear extension is approximately 3.7 meters from the boundary with the attached house at number 8. And there's an elevated walkway that surrounds that extension, which is raised by approximately 1.5 meters above ground level, and it has metal railings. And there's approximately 2 meters between the walkway and the boundary with number 8 at the moment. So turning to the proposal, the plans are shown there. The existing extension and walkway, and then the proposal, which is for an extension across the full width. You can just see the red dashed outline of the existing. That's a bit more detail on the ground floor. So you can see it extends out slightly further than the existing, and then to the side. And then there's the decking to the back of that. The upper floor plan, that's first floor level. There is an existing dormer in that position. This is just the extension at first floor level. And that's the rear elevation as proposed. So you can see proposal for this barrier to be erected along the boundary or just inside the boundary. Well, that's the upper floor, just sections through. So that's through at that point through the bedroom and then the bathroom. Just showing how that works. And there are some visual images of the proposal. Slightly different angles, all from the rear, obviously. And you can see the barrier that's proposed to be erected to the neighbour. So reasons for refusal, which are stated in full in the agenda, and the key points are design and materials were considered to be inappropriate and incongruous in the area, such that it would be out of keeping with the scale and character of surrounding properties. That there would be overlooking and a loss of privacy from the raised deck and the Juliet balcony, by which is meant not a balcony but full height windows that open into the room, so that the room itself is the balcony, if you see what I mean. So that those would increase intensity of use at an elevated level, impacting on residential amenity of the neighbours, and that therefore the proposal would be contrary to policies on design, residential areas and amenity in the local plan and national planning framework 4. So for the applicant, first of all, overall, they didn't consider the proposals to be overdevelopment of the plot, or that they were out of scale and character with the surrounding area in terms of materials or the size of the proposal. They make the point that the proposed extension is in part a replacement of an existing extension to the rear, that the footprint would be increased by only 17 square metres with resultant plot ratio of 25%, which is below the guidance. Proposals are to the rear, not visible from the street, that the proposal would tie in with the existing roof profile with the eaves and ridges in terms of its pitch and the hipped gable end, that the proposed extension matches the existing dwelling in terms of its natural slate roof finish, and that they would be open to discussing and amending external finishes of the proposal were those raised by the case officer at the time. And that the majority of dwellings in the vicinity are 1.5 storey, and a number of these have 1.5 storey full width extensions to the rear. And there's a plan indicating similar properties, similar extensions that exist within the area. Further points in terms of overlooking and privacy made by the applicant, that the site is sloping and that all the properties with rear gardens along this road have gardens sloping down, and so that there's an element of overlooking from all the properties into neighbouring gardens. The existing rear extension includes a conservatory with a south-facing glazing, and there's existing overlooking of number 8. There's a photograph of that within the submissions, and that this proposal removes this direct line of sight with windows all facing the private garden to the east. They make the point that numbers 10 and 12, along with others in the street, share driveways into the rear garden, which has the result of reducing privacy between the dwellings. The proposals were amended to incorporate the privacy screen to the boundary, which I pointed out in the plans earlier. They just highlight the meaning of Juliet balcony, that it's full height glazed windows rather than an actual external balcony. And they raise an application nearby at number 12, which was for a similar height proposal, and photographs submitted from the existing conservatory, which I mentioned previously. So in terms of the planning history, the case officer's report also refers to that application at 12 Woodhill Place, and it notes the difference in the decking being adjacent to the joint driveway rather than the boundary. In terms of consultations, Rosemount and Mile End had a community council had no comments submitted, and there was one representation from the neighbour which stated that they had no objection, but that the extension would be out of keeping with the original building and would be overdevelopment. And they made some additional comments advising that the development wouldn't have a negative impact on the neighbouring property due to the wall that's proposed between. So at that point, back to members to decide how to proceed.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Green. We now need to consider whether we have sufficient information in front of us today to take a decision on the application. Members reminded that if you do not feel you have enough information to take a decision, you can request that further written information be provided, hearings be arranged, or a site visit to take place. We'll now go around the room. Councillor Cook, do you feel that you have sufficient information?
Happy with sufficient information.
Thank you. Councillor Clark.
I feel I've got sufficient information.
Thank you. Councillor Bouse.
I feel I've got sufficient information.
Thank you. Councillor Radley.
Agreed. Sufficient information.
Thank you. I also agree that we have sufficient information, so we're happy to proceed. Okay. As members feel they have sufficient information, we'll now hear from Ms. Green on relevant policies and considerations for this review. Ms. Green, back to you.
Thank you. So in terms of the policies, similar ones to in the previous case in the National Planning Framework, the first 3 policies refer to pretty much all applications and are overarching principles that should be taken into account. Sorry, I've just lost my notes. In terms of policy 14 and 16, I'll just move on to the next slide. Okay, sorry. You can see those slides still, I assume. So policy 16 relates to householder developments and states that these will be supported where they don't have a detrimental impact on the character and amenity of the area. Sorry, I just lost my connection then. And the second point is that they don't have a detrimental impact on neighbouring properties in terms of physical impact, overshadowing or overlooking. And then policy 14 is about design and is similar to the policy in our own local plan. So in terms of those policies, it's within a residential area in terms of policy H1. Policy D1 on design is relevant, and also policy D2 on amenity relevant in terms of privacy, daylighting and sunlighting. So just looking in a bit more detail, policy H1, it's obviously residential development within a residential area, so would be improved in principle in accordance with this policy, dependent on these criteria. Does it constitute overdevelopment? Would it have an unacceptable impact on the character and amenity of the surrounding area? There's no loss of open space, so the final criteria relates to the householder guidance. And this has general principles which relate to architectural compatibility of the design and the scale of the proposal in relation to the original house and the surroundings. In terms of materials, would they be complementary to the existing house and the surroundings? Would the extension overwhelm or dominate the original form or appearance of the house? And would it result in a situation where the amenity of neighbouring properties would be adversely affected, with significant adverse impact counting against the proposal? Design policy, similar to that in NPF 4, high quality design is sought. With small scale proposals, although not making a significant placemaking impact, recognising that good design and detail adds to the overall attractiveness of the built environment. So in terms of evaluation, it's the primacy of the development plan, with all decisions being made in accordance with those policies unless material considerations indicate otherwise. And in this case, would the proposal comply with the zoning policy residential areas? How would the proposal affect character and amenity of the area? And would there be an unacceptable impact on overlooking and privacy? So overall, does the proposal comply with the development plan? Sorry, I'm just behind with the slides. Or are there other material considerations of sufficient weight to overcome any conflict with the development plan? And I'm happy to answer any questions. Sorry about the slides jumping there. Just keep losing connection for a second.
It's not a problem, Ms. Green. Thank you very much. Do any members have any questions for Ms. Green? Yeah, Mr. Cook.
Thanks, convener. Yeah, just I am right in thinking that this is not a conservation area.
Yes, that's right.
So, and I can understand why the officer has said the design might be incongruous with the surrounding area. If we were minded to approve it, would it be appropriate to put some sort of condition on relating to the finish and the materials? And if so, what kind of condition might that look like?
Well, we do have standard conditions which require details of materials to be submitted. I think possibly the difficulty comes if we were to want a complete change. It's usually, to look at the detail of a material that's indicated. I mean, I'm aware as well that the applicants said that they would be willing to discuss materials. It's just if there was a significant change there, that could be a difficulty.
Yeah,
So,
sorry.
well, so
Go
you could attach a condition to get, you know, further details of the materials shown.
Yeah, sorry. I mean, where it was coming from was there's a comment in the papers that said it looks like a Swiss chalet, which I kind of agree with. But then I'm thinking, is that me being unreasonable? So if it was more akin to what's in the area, I'd be more minded to approve it. But as I say, I'm just not sure whether that's me being unreasonable.
Yeah, I don't know that I can add any more to that other than, yeah, to completely change the materials from timber would not be normally the way that we would use the condition. We would usually get further details about the material that's shown. So, but you could condition materials.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Clark.
Would it be at all possible, convener, to have a look at the pictures that were shown earlier, showing the back porch where the partition is?
Yeah, if Miss Green wants to cycle through that photographs, we'll find the one that you're looking for.
Thank you.
I think it was at design elevations.
Was it those?
Is that the one, Councillor Clark?
Yes, that's the ones that I was looking for. That's fine, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions from the committee? Councillor Cook.
Thanks, Community. Yeah, it was actually a comment rather than a question. In the papers, the lady at number 8 said, "I'm 81. It's not really for me to comment because I won't be around that long." Just wanted to put on record what a nice attitude to have.
Thank you, Councillor Cook. If we don't have any further questions or comments, I think we'll move to determination. Oh no, it's not. I think we have a discussion now. So does anyone want to enter a debate into this one at all? I'm not seeing anyone at the moment. Okay, I do note the comments regarding the chalet, Swiss chalet, like it is I'll say quite a substantial addition to the area. So whether or not it's enough for us to refuse it on that. What's everyone's thoughts on that one?
I'm tempted. Well, I'm minded to agree with you. It is out of keeping with the existing residential properties, and that does cause me a wee bit of concern. It's just, I guess, what can we do with that? You know, the applicants are willing to look at the materials that are being used, but to what extent, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think if we were to mandate a complete change in materials, I would take legal advice in this. I think it would need to be a refusal and a resubmit of the application if Ms. Kloss wants to come in on that one.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think I would agree we'd have to be very careful in that respect because we are to consider the application that is before us. So yeah, I would be minded to agree that if that was the view taken by the LRB, that it would, the most appropriate steps would be for resubmission, perhaps after discussing with planning, the planning department about what would be suitable on the site.
Thank you. What's thoughts on that one at the moment? Councillor Cook.
Yeah, I'm kind of I'm with you and with Councillor Radley in that I am not completely comfortable with the look of it, with the materials. So if it came back to, if there was a discussion with planning and a slightly different appearance, I would be more minded to approve it. I mean, it strikes me it's that there are similar extensions in the area. It doesn't seem to be a huge increase in the footprint. So in most cases, in most respects, I'm actually minded to approve it. But as I say, I've got some concerns about the materials.
I would agree. I don't think the actual footprint is out of keeping with others in the area that we've seen from the photos. I don't think it actually reduces some of the overlooking with the neighbouring property. So on those points, I'm minded to agree with Councillor Cook. It's just the cladding that is holding me back here. It is out of keeping with other extensions that are in the area, and it's out of keeping with the building itself.
Yeah, I'd tend to agree with that point, but I'm just concerned that if we do put conditions on that changes the design and material too much, does that change the overall application in that regards of the finishing? That's my only concern on that. I do agree that the size and the building itself and that doesn't really, it is just the finishing of that. Yeah. Councillor Cook.
Yeah, just a question for legal. Would it be open to us at this point in the proceedings to for the applicant to withdraw the application and have a discussion with planning around the materials? So it's not turning down or approving with conditions. It would be back off, withdraw, pause, because the applicant has said they'd be willing to discuss alternative materials. Just is that technically possible?
The LRB are really restricted in terms of the options available at this point. So you can uphold, you can vary, or you're overturning it. So I don't think that would technically really fall within those three, and that withdrawn really is within the gift of the applicant. So I think that would maybe be just pushing the LRB's powers a little bit too far in that respect.
Thanks.
Yeah, I'd agree with legal stance on that. I would be minded at that point then to probably refuse at the moment and put it back to the applicant to what they want to do with that on the basis of the conversations that have been held here.
I would agree, convener. I think given the options that are open to us, essentially agree, overturn, or vary.
Yeah.
I think at this point, personally, I feel the only option is to refuse and allow them to come back with an alternative suggestion.
I'd agree with that as well.
Okay. Anyone else? Miss Green.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify in terms of a refusal. Sorry if I'm jumping the gun a bit there, but that it's just on materials and there are no other issues. Is that just?
I think that's where we're going in this one, Miss Green. Yes.
Can I just, sorry to interrupt as well, can I just get Councillor Clark and Councillor Bowes to state their decision as well, please?
Yeah.
Thanks, sorry.
Yeah, so it's that, yeah, also minded to uphold the officer recommendations on the basis of materials, yeah.
And Councillor Clark.
Sorry, I likewise uphold due to the materials. That is my view as well.
Okay, thank you. So therefore, the local review body has therefore agreed to unanimously uphold the decision of the appointed officer, and the application is therefore refused on the reasons stated by members here today. Thank you. Please note that decision notes from today's meeting will be issued to the applicant or agent in the forthcoming days. That brings today's LRB to a close. Thank you all members for attending. And we will see you at the next meeting of the planning committee, which is scheduled to take place in 2 weeks' time, I think. Thank you very much and have a good morning. Thank you.
Thank you.